All systems go. Clear for liftoff.
What is going on, golf fans? It's your boy, GS Luke, with our round 4 live stream for the Genesis Invitational. Going to go over everything you need to know out there for your showdown lineups, including a weather report, a little recap of some of the shots gained metrics, any questions that you have down there in chat, including anything on the strategy side. We'll touch on a lot of that heading into a Sunday showdown slate, as well as any questions you have about specific players. So any deep dives you guys want us to do when we get to the shots gained, feel free to go ahead and throw those down in the chat. But however, whatever you're doing over here on your Saturday, I hope it's treating you guys nicely and you're ready to talk some golf over there for tomorrow. So it started off with a look at the golf course, which today did favor the first half of tee time. So as we kind of theorized on last night's stream, we thought that with the winds kicking up as the day went on, also the fact that the course was going to firm out a little bit, that the morning guys might be a little bit better when it came to the scoring. Now, if you take a look at the first versus second half, it was nearly a 0.7 shot difference out there from the first to the second half. So what I did is I tried to target guys out there the first maybe 3-4 hours, first let's say 2 hours of tee times was what I mostly did. And that really worked out in my exposure. So hopefully it ended up working out well for you guys as well. But if you woke up in the morning, the forecast really showed us that it wasn't as drastic as what we might have hoped for. But in reality, it kicked up from about like 2 to 3 miles an hour to closer to like 8-9 in the afternoon. So that was nice to go out there and lock in. But what this teaches us heading into tomorrow's slate is that when the course firms out, it can lead to a 0.5 to a 1 shot difference. So tomorrow the weather looks pretty flat. Today maybe it kicked up a little bit more than what we're going to see for tomorrow, but even without a whole bunch of wind out here in this forecast, it's safe to say that as the course gets a little bit drier, then it might become a little bit harder to go out there and score. On top of that, you've got the pressure factor out there on the Sunday. You know, all the guys potentially choking as they come down the stretch. That's also going to work against some of that scoring. So this was the HRRR forecast that I had up here to begin. But if we go through some of the other ones on here, a lot of the other ones look even flatter than what we have for the HRRR. So this NAM looks like it kicks up maybe just a hair out there from morning to afternoon. Medio blue looks very consistent. Same thing with this ECM and icon model. So just like I said, out there for round number 3, you should be prepared to go out there and wake up before lock and take a look at what we have for the forecast. Because if we wake up tomorrow and this HRRR forecast is calling for some spicier winds towards the afternoon, then maybe we want to take more of an AM heavy approach. But because it is Sunday showdown and we have some placement points in play, you can never go all in on an AM advantage. That, of course, because you're going to need some top 5 finishing position points to go out there and take home a GPP. But when you're trying to find some early starters, trying to get some leverage out there in your lineups, going after some of those players might not be the worst idea. So we'll look at the weather towards the end of the live stream as well, see if we have any sort of an update over here from the HRRR. But as of right now, it could be a slight advantage over there for our lineups, but always something that you're going to want to stay on top of. We'll go through the shots gained metrics, any player deep dives here in just a second, but I do want to mention the stone out here for round 4. You've got the approach series, which I mentioned over there on the round 2 and 3 live streams. You got the true approach delta, which you're trying to maximize over there in that category, but also that round 4 historical, which round 2 and 3 historical I think is always helpful, but round 4 historical I would say is the most helpful of all the different rounds because you have that pressure coming into play. So, you know, if you see somebody over here on the round 4 historical when this updates out here for round 4 and they're like your D or an F, well, and if they're chalk out there for tomorrow, those could be prime fade candidates. And the opposite could be true of guys that are starting a little bit further back. And because we have 2 value guys up there towards the top, right? You've got Denny, you've got first place out there, Patrick Rogers, 2 guys that aren't known as world killers. You're going to want to go after some chasers. And it's not just the chasers at -3, -4 that you're hoping can go out there and finish in the top 5. You might want to consider guys even further back because you saw some low rounds out there today, right? If you had your best stuff, you could shoot someone like -4, -5. You don't have your best stuff, you were shooting like 1 to 3, even 4 over par. So there's a very very wide disparity when it comes to your scoring. But for showdown purposes, it's not all going to be about the scoring, right? Because you have some of those -4, -5 rounds, right? It's not like Sunday at the US Open under brutal conditions where you'd be lucky to go out there and shoot -1, -2. When you have -4s and -5s out there looming, you've got to be incorporating that into your process. So just to go ahead and sort this by score today, I mean, look at all these ceiling performances that you had. You had guys like Hideki, Echeverria, McNeely, Cantlay, Rogers, all shooting -4 or better. And we have almost identical conditions for Sunday. Now, they might try and make the pin locations a hair harder, so you might not see as many ceiling rounds. But I mean, if we extend this to -3, right, look how many people were taking this place low. So when this happens, you're going to have to, have some placement points, of course, but it de-emphasizes the need for them a bit. If we had 20, 30 mile an hour winds tomorrow, right, I'd be looking at that top end of the leaderboard. So let's sort this by score and maybe prioritizing guys like Denny and Patrick Rogers just a little bit more. But as they stand right now, and we haven't even looked at any shots gained metrics, right, for those two players, they're going to be by far the most popular options on the slate. And while I don't think you have to fade those top two players, but you could make a good argument for going out there and fading them, as they're going to be by far the highest one. I'm talking like 40, maybe 50% ownership on somebody like a Rogers. You're talking probably close to 30, 40% on somebody like a Denny McCarthy. And even though they're towards the top, they're probably going to finish in the top 10 at worst. I mean, that's even with a blow-up round, right? Finishing top 10. Even if they do that, that's no guarantee for them to get to the optimal lineup. Because you have all those -3 or better rounds that I just pointed out, you're going to have to shoot a lot better than that kind of score, right? Something that even if they shoot like even par tomorrow and go out there and win the golf tournament, let's say that one of these two blows up, the other one shoots even par and goes out there and wins, that is no guarantee for them to make the optimal lineup. So you just have to keep that in mind when you're going out there and building. If one of these guys goes out there and shoots like -2, you're for sure going to have to go out there and have them in builds. But these kind of players can be your placement points as well, whether it's, it's all these studs too. I mean, look at this. Aubert there in third place, obviously, but you got Cantlay, Fleetwood, Finau, all world killers down there. You go to the -3s, it's Scotty, McIlroy, JT that you have down there at that score. And -2 is probably too far back to go out there and win. But if you're looking for top 5 placement points, like these -2, -1s are well within the range of outcomes as well. So you've got just a ton of guys that you can use for the placement points that don't have to be these two mega chalky guys towards the top. So I haven't built my player pool yet. I haven't decided on where I'm going to put all my exposure, but the things that are going through my mind before we even go through the shots gained metrics are that these two are going to be pretty hard to want to get to, right? They're getting all that steam, all that ownership. And even though it is a round 4 showdown slate, you like to play ownership where you can. Like, you like to get as much leverage as possible out there into your lineups. And because there are so many studs here, it's another thing I want to point out, because these guys up there in the top 20 are predominantly your 8K plus players, the ownership's going to be spread out, right? If it was only like Scotty Scheffler, Tommy Fleetwood that you had up here in the top 10 that were players that were studs towards the top, they might be 40, 50% owned, like we've seen out there in some Sunday showdown slates. But because it's Cantlay, Finau, you got McIlroy out there mixed in as well, the ownership's going to be kept in check on all of those kind of studs. So these value plays for sure going to get steamed up. But these guys that are more expensive that you would think would be super popular aren't going to be as popular because of that. So I think it's just a very interesting slate when it comes to the strategy, right? You're still going to have to target some guys towards the top, but just some food for thought, I should say, out there with those top 2 players, because their ownership is going to be through the roof over there. Let's go to the shots gained metrics. Let's talk through any player questions that you guys have for me. And then we're also going to go through some stats together when it comes to the field. So we'll look at some of the ball striking poppers out there throughout rounds 1 through 3, as well as some of the guys that popped with their ball striking today. But let's catch up on chat. It looks like we have a lot to go through. So first off, looks like Alan had himself a day today, of course, and appreciate the kind words over there. C. Floyd as well. Also, Sean had themselves a day. You'll love to see it. Let's see. Where are we at, Nick Cat? 7th spot in the lottery. You were in it for some of the day too. There you go. He said, you need your advice to keep your shit together. The advice is that you're not going to keep your shit together. If you're sweating a lineup in 7th in the lottery, I would say to go out there and embrace it. So if you're somebody that likes to go out there and sweat their ass off, then know that that's coming tomorrow. There's going to be some ups and downs with any sort of GPP sweat, and just take them as they come, right? You're going to have guys that make bogeys tomorrow. Just kind of know that ahead of time. And I sound like I'm telling a golfer what to do when they're in contention, but it's the same kind of thing. Like, you just have to know that it's going to be a ride and be around for it. So hopefully you have some really good run good tomorrow. And yeah, that nervousness, that losing your shit is a good thing, right? That means you're in a spot that you want to be in. So like I said, just soak it all in. Have a lot of fun with it tomorrow. I don't have lineups quite that up high, but I've done it plenty of times before. So I know exactly how you feel. And you won't sleep as well tonight, but it'll be worth it tomorrow. What's going on? Go Clit. What's going on? Christian currently sitting at 4th in the big $200. Best of luck out there tomorrow. We got a question about Patrick Rogers' dad. Actually, you spoke with P-Rod's dad. Hopefully you'll be celebrating in Cali tomorrow night. Cheers to that. I've got to say, I've got some P-Rod in my lineup. So if he holds on to win, I will not complain about it. That's for sure. Where are we at? Nathan says, what's going on, Luke? Haven't been able to attend a live for a minute. Am I sweating any UFC lineups? I've got some bets in, so I wasn't able to catch lock out there for my lineups. I thought it locked at 7, so I didn't have anything reserved. But a few of my buddies bet UFC, most namely my guy Bruntune, who might be watching this, by the way. He's more of a UFC guy than a golf guy, though. And I telled some of his plays. So I'm looking at that. It's not a huge thing for me, just a little fun that we're playing. Can you go to 3+ pivots? And how many birdies does one need to overpower the placement points? So 3+ pivots. 3 is where I would cap it off, because you're going to need 3 guys in the large field GPPs to go out there and take anything down. Like, you need the winner most likely, not all the times. Like, if one of those guys up top shoots even par and wins, you might not have to have them in the large field GPP, but you're going to need 2-3 guys up there towards the top. So 3+ pivots, you're getting a little sketchy there, but yeah, if you cap it off at 3, I think it's doable. Your MMA lineups got smashed. You had Souza. Yeah, I haven't watched many of the fights, so I don't even know what happened to Souza or whether he was popular or anything. What's going on, Chris? When looking at true delta approach, what am I looking for? Heavily positive true approach deltas out there in both categories. So that would be the best way to simplify it for you. They have a really good tutorial on their site going over like how to interpret that. So you might want to check that out for the entire info there, but that's what you got. Yeah, thanks. You were winning 150 grand and then 100 grand for a long time. Yeah, hey, 7th place is a good spot to be in. So, hey, if you end up finishing at 8 grand, that wouldn't stink either, but I'm rooting for you to take down the whole thing. That's for sure. Is Pendrith due tomorrow to have one of those kind of rounds? So yeah, let's go through it. So Pendrith is going off first. So the motivation is really what you have to question. Is he due to go low? I don't know if he's necessarily due to go out there and go low, but he has it in him. I mean, these kind of players that are way towards the bottom, they don't have that much incentive to go out there and stay engaged. But if he shoots like -2 through his first 4 or 5 holes, and then he gets to hole 6, which is that reachable par 5, and he's thinking about potentially making an eagle there, like that's when he can run the table and be the kind of player that you have to have. But if he's like even par even through the first 5-6 holes, then you got to watch out for Taylor Pendrith, because he's getting to the hard stretch of the golf course there, right? Holes 7 through 15, 16 are absolutely brutal out there. It's I don't know, it's a tough scene. It's like an Ori could kind of play, right? Like, he's going to be super low owned out there in the GPPs, but there's kind of a reason for that, right? He hasn't been playing that well this week. And like I said, the motivation could be a huge question mark there. And of course, Nick, let's go through a few shots gained metrics together. So like I said, any specific players you want to deep dive on, go ahead and let me know. But what I usually like to do out here before every showdown slate is get an idea for how everyone hit it today. As I've mentioned plenty of times before, this is the most consistent stat out there from round to round. So your poppers, guys like JT, Thagala, Michael Kim, all up there towards the top end of the board, are going to get a significant bump in my modeling. Now, Sahith Thagala, worth noting that he holed out for an eagle today, so that has a lot to do with him gaining about 3 strokes on approach. But JT absolutely flushed it, but could not make a putt for his life. So starting there at T8, right up there towards the top end of the board, he'll get some ownership. All those guys that are there at like T8, right, T15 or better are going to get some ownership out there in GPPs. But this is the kind of guy that I'd be flag planting. I'd be going out there probably playing at some ownership. Now I'm going to have to go through the rest of my projections, see if I end up getting there. But, you know, gaining 4 strokes on approach the day before is going to be something that's really hard to go out there and pass up. And I didn't take a look at the hole by hole breakdown yet, but I'm assuming he didn't have any hole outs because he didn't have any eagles on the round today. That really inflated that number. So that 4 shots gained on approach is a true 4 shots gained on approach, unless there's something that I didn't catch during the round today. Michael Kim gaining 2.6 strokes. He's there at T13, of course, was in contention last week. So you'd have to say that an informed player hitting the ball well has to be worthy of at least a few looks. Mav McNeely hit the ball well. He's also up there at T8, but even like a T20, a T33 player, like a JT Poston here, right, these could be some of your mid to early starters that you're using for a little bit of a weather advantage. Already mentioned that one right off the bat, but also to get some differentiation into your lineup. So, we want to try and find our JTs to go out there and flag plant, et cetera, towards the top end of the board. But guys like a JT, a Bazainhood, it doesn't have to be those two that you'd use as a low-owned play, but those sort of plays are also extremely important. And Adam Scott hit the ball well today, but he had tons of issues over there on the greens. Last week at Pebble Beach was one of the best putters that we've seen for quite some time, right? He absolutely ran the table Saturday, Sunday at Pebble Beach. So kind of a surprise that he lost 3 strokes putting today, but it was 3 putts. That'll do it for you. And then he had a lot of putts from 5 to 12 feet that he ended up missing out there for birdie. So he ended up making 4 on the day, which is crazy. Despite all those short misses, he played a lot better than his scorecard would indicate. Like at T42, you're not getting placement points, no matter how well he goes out there and plays tomorrow. But with all those -3 or better rounds out there, if he shoots one of those, that could be his way to the optimal lineup. And unlike some of the other players around him, you're talking about next to no ownership on somebody like an Adam Scott. So there's always a time and place for getting to some of these certain plays. 3+ slots in all your lineups should probably be guys starting up there in the top 20. But 2 or 3 of them should be guys like an Adam Scott as well that you're using for some of that differentiation. I like looking at some of the off the tee poppers as well. So Taylor Pendrith really drove it well today. He did make 4 birdies, which was clutch for one of the props that it ended up taking. But these guys that are flushing it off the tee are also worth looking at as well. You've got that long rough this week. Being long and accurate off the tee is your key to going out there and shooting a low score. And I think the best example of this would be a Ricky Fowler today, who on the front 9, which by the way was shooting under par today, much easier than what you have on the backside. He shot +1, so started horribly. I thought he was dead for any sort of showdown exposure, but on the harder backside, he drove the ball beautifully. I mean, look at this, right? He hit every fairway but 2 on the backside, ended up making 3 birdies and no bogeys on that side of the scorecard. These are the kind of driving performances that could lead you to an optimal performance. Now, Ricky Fowler, who's a sketchy driver, probably not the kind of guy that you should be counting on doing that 2 times in a row. But guys like Patrick Rogers, I mean, he's up there in the lead for a reason. He drove the ball beautifully. And if you take a look at a player over his first 3 rounds, this is really where you can start to narrow down whether you think that they're a good play. So round 3, gained off the tee. Round number 2 was able to do that as well. Then round number 1 did that as well. So you can see that that's been the consistent part of his game, right? That's really what's been carrying him over these 3 rounds. The putter's also been positive in all 3 rounds. So those are really the 2 hallmarks of his game so far. Heading into Sunday, the putter can be a little hit or miss for players. The nerves tend to affect the flat stick quicker than it does the ball striking. But for guys like a Patrick Rogers, the off the tee is also a huge bright spot. So, I hope he plays well because I have him in a lot of main slate lineups, but the ownership is also tough to get by. And same thing with Denny McCarthy, right? Like he can look as solid as we want when it comes to the ball striking stats. It's just going to be a tough scene when you look at that ownership number that's 40 to 50% in a few cases with those players. Going back to the round 3 stats, I also like to take a look at the guys who gained a bunch on the greens to potentially go after some regression. And look at this Hideki Matsuyama guy. Right, round 1, I mean, let's just take a look at it because I'll show you. This guy is so bipolar with the putter. It's not funny. He gains 5 strokes to the putter today. Great. I had him in a bunch of lineups, so I'm totally cool with that. Day before, though, loses nearly 3 strokes. And then round 1, he gained 2 strokes over there with the putter. So, if this trend continues, he's probably due to go out there and lose a whole bunch of strokes putting. But what I more so show you this for, and I've mentioned it the last few days, the trend has continued. This is why you fade guys that gain a whole bunch of strokes putting, because even your best putters usually come back down to earth the next day. So I use that as a little bit of a case example there. But going back to the top end of that list, Guys like Cantlay got a little bit lucky. Patrick Rogers, right? He had that one long bomb on 17 that he made. Wasn't just that one. He had a few other putts that he probably shouldn't have had drop. Guys like McNeely got a lucky with the putter. Hoagie, Echeverria, Finau, all players that graded out well with the flat stick, especially guys like a Hoagie, a Finau. I would say, yeah, mostly those two players that aren't really known for the putter are really candidates to go out there and regress to the mean. So, just like we want to look for ball striking poppers, well, these guys that popped a whole bunch of the putter are sometimes a little bit of a red flag as opposed to a good thing. If we take a look at the guys that lost a whole bunch of strokes putting, a lot of times you'll see these guys regress back to the mean. So Scotty Scheffler, by the way, another example of one of these players, right? He lost 3 strokes putting today. The day before, we were mentioning that he gained like 4 or 5 strokes out there with his short game. So it's crazy how quickly it turns from round to round, right? Not just the fact that he gained like 3 strokes around the green the day before, he lost half a stroke around the green today. So it comes quickly when this happens. But the guys that lost over here, like a Rory and Adam Scott, like you might want to look to for a little bit of a bounce back. So like another spend up that I might use as a conviction play might be Rory McIlroy. Another reason for that, I faded him out there for my main slate lineups. So if he has a huge Sunday surge, and it would just be so on par for Rory McIlroy. I mean, would it not? Not really ever having a chance to win this golf tournament, but backdooring a top 3 finish, that kind of thing. He did it at the Masters a few years ago. He tends to do it a lot out here on the PGA Tour. Stat-wise, there's hardly a chance that he goes out there and putts that poorly again. In fact, I saw a tweet, I think it was from Rick Run Good over there on Twitter/X, and he said it was like his 6th worst performance ever when it came to his shots gained putting. So, he's only had like 5 rounds out of his like 900 plus rounds recorded where he's played poorer than that. So probably not going to happen again. And Adam Scott, same thing. He putted so well last week. And in fact, even just yesterday, if we take a look at Adam Scott's putting, he was a lot better than what you had for today. So I say a lot better, but he still ended up losing strokes to the field. Round 1 also lost strokes to the field. So it's become a little bit of a trend this week, but losing 3 strokes, probably not happening a third time, right? He's likely going to go out there, be a little bit closer to a neutral. And considering how well he's been hitting it, that would be in line for a pretty low performance. Scotty's probably not going to lose 3 again. Guys like a Jaeger, you know what? I would say that Jaeger's probably not going to lose 3 strokes putting again, but he probably will, because let's look at what he's done this week. Lost 3 strokes today. Yesterday, lost half a stroke. So, okay, it was a little bit better, right? But round 1, he also lost 3 strokes putting. So, Jaeger, in jest, I say that. In actuality, he probably does have a little bit of a better putting day. But these are the kind of guys that you could see some regression from as well. Over here around the green, you could take a look at some of the big negative guys. So let's go back to round number 3. I think, we were looking at the right category before. Let's go back to this around the green here. Tom Hoagie, a player that lost a bunch in that category, also a Patrick Cantlay. Now, they were guys that also gained a bunch out there with the putter. So, that's kind of some conflicting regression that you have with those two. But like a Taylor Pendrith here. So we did have the question about him before. Short game wise, he probably does see some regression. So we had the question about whether he's due for a low round. The worry, I guess, was the approach play. Got to hope that he's able to turn that around at some point. But the short game, you just can't see it being as bad as what it was in round number 3. So these are some of the ways that you can find some value plays down towards the bottom, right? If you can find somebody that's starting towards the middle to bottom end of the board, that could be that little bit of a weather edge that we were talking about before, but also the key to getting that differentiation that you're going to need to offset some of that chalk. So let me reset the leaderboard here, see if there's any other deep dives that we need to do. If not, we're going to go through some lineup construction. So we're going to go through what you should be thinking about when building lineups, but let me catch up on the chat before we do that. Where did we leave off? Yeah, I did see that, Dave. I think it was Rick Run Good that ended up tweeting that, but you are absolutely correct. Where did we leave off? So Hideki deep dive. So Hideki gained a bunch out there with the putter. So it kind of feels unsustainable to me. So in terms of the stat profile, it is not favorable heading into tomorrow out there on the big guy. Where did we leave off? Could I rank Grazeman, Burns, and Hughes? So if you're talking about for like a large field GPP, it's kind of tough to compare those because they're not in the same kind of pricing. Like Sam Burns is significantly more expensive than guys like Razorman and Hughes. So you'll have to let me know, Kim, like what you're asking about, because I'm assuming it's like for a matchup or a 3-ball or something like that. Go ahead and let me know. Scheffler, has to be a bounce back candidate. You like that for 12,700. Yeah, he's going to be a lot lower owned than what we've seen all week. So I think that a lot more people are going to hammer the guys at Cantlay, Fleetwood, Finau that are a lot cheaper. It's easier to fit in like 2 or 3 of the guys like that into a lineup. You use a Scotty Scheffler, even a Rory up there at like 11K. It's really tough to take like 3 of those guys up top. Like you're taking one of those guys, probably like 1 or 8 or 9K guy, and then moving down to the 7Ks. So I think the ownership's going to stay off of especially Scotty, but even somebody like Rory, because it's tough salary to go ahead and pull that off. Where do we at? Hey, thanks. You helped you, of course, Biz. Let's go ahead and run it back. And let's go through some of the lineup construction stuff. So in terms of our lineup construction for tomorrow, you want to worry about the placement points for a few spots that you're going out there and filling out, but it's not the end all be all, especially out there in those large field GPPs. You know, if you're entering against 10,000 entries, 20, 30,000, like we'll have for some of the bigger majors here later in the season, you've really got to figure out a way to move up the leaderboards when you get stuff right. Because let's go to the top end of the board here. Let's say this is just a thought experiment here, guys. Let's say that Patrick Rogers wins. Let's say that Aubert makes, a good run at it, but doesn't end up winning the golf tournament. And let's say that JT does the same thing. Again, it's just arbitrary. This just is a thought experiment here. If this ends up being the 3 guys that you have to have up there towards the top end of the board, you're talking about like 40, 50% ownership on a Rogers. You're talking about probably close to 35. Yeah, I would probably say 30, 35% over there in somebody like an Aubert, 20 to maybe 25% on a Justin Thomas. You're talking about an extremely chalky core. Now, large field GPP, you're going to have the nuts to go out there and take it down. And because there are enough really good players that have a chance to finish top 5, you're going to have some of these really highly owned guys towards the top end of the board. So if you're starting with a battery like this and you're playing against those 20, 30,000 entries, you're not going to be the only one that's starting with these 3 players, right? Like you got to think about things logically here. You're going to be sharing this core of 3 players with perhaps thousands of other people, especially if you're using a really chalky core of 3 players up top. So when you're starting with a core like this, and I don't think that's a bad idea, as I mentioned, you need some placement points on a slate like this. Just know that your last 3 spots are going to have to be where you're getting that differentiation. And you might be able to get away with adding in one more piece of chalk here if you're not using a super chalky player like a Patrick Rogers. So for example, if you went with guys that were high owned, but maybe not as highly owned is what you have there with a Patrick Rogers, then maybe you could take 4 guys out there in that kind of lineup. So let's go ahead and throw an Echeverria in there. He's towards the top, but I don't think he's going to be overly chalky because he's down there at $6,100. And then let's also throw in a Burger here at $7,200. So in this kind of lineup, we do have 4 pieces of quote unquote chalk, right? 4 guys starting up there in the top 20. It's a little bit more swallowable. It's a little bit more okay to go out there and play because you don't have the guys that are 40, 50% out there in this kind of lineup. Right? Like your highest owned player here would be an Aubert and then a Justin Thomas down there at 25%. But your last 2 positions in this kind of lineup, you're going to have to get really different to the rest of the field. You have 8,605 remaining for your last 2 spots, which is going to make it tough to do so. I mean, if you're taking, a leverage play towards the top end of the board, like Pendrith could be one of those players, but there's not really many to choose from. Like maybe a Tom Kim, Shane Lowry, even a Russell Henley might be a little bit lower owned than some of the other guys around him, but you can't play a Fleetwood if you're starting with this set of 4 players. You can't use a Cantlay out here in this kind of lineup because if you do that, you literally only have 1 spot to get different to the field. So that's why I was mentioning before that using 4 chalky guys might even be pushing it a little bit. I think the 3-3 balance, 3 guys towards the top and then 3 guys that are middle and chasing is the way that you want to go about building lineups. So if you're going, with this kind of build, right, 3 guys, you're locking in those top 5 points. Down low, this is where you're getting that differentiation. So an Adam Scott, a player that we already mentioned, could have a little bit of positive regression. Let's go ahead and throw in Zalatoris. It's not so much the names that we're clicking here. It's more so the thought process. And then even if you used a Sam Burns to round off this lineup, spent all of your salary over here for Sunday, you're going to get away with it because you've got Scott at sub 10%, a sub 10% Will Zalatoris as well. I think Burns is going to be at most about 10% owned, probably sub 10% out there in GPPs because of all the chalk around him. You have those 3 low owned plays to offset some of that chalk towards the top. So that should likely be your strategy out there for tomorrow. 3 chalky guys, 3 guys that are pivots. Now, if you're in a single entry, maybe you do take it to 4 guys that you're playing towards the top. Because if you're only playing against, let's say, a couple hundred to maybe 1,000 entries in one of those smaller GPPs or a single entry, then you don't have to get as different to the field. You don't have to have as much leverage to move up those contests, but you also can't completely ignore it. So for the love of God, guys, do not sort this by position and then just play all the guys that are up there in the top 5. So for example, don't play this lineup. So let's go ahead and make this as chalky as humanly possible, right? You're taking all the guys in the top 5. You have 7,500, so you could probably round it off there with like a McNeely. If you play this combination of 6 players, you're an absolute doofus and you're an absolute donkey out there for tomorrow. This is the only, you can only play that in cash. If you're going out there and going after those placement points, if you're in a single entry, or even if you're in especially the large field GPP, don't make that kind of mistake out there with your lineups. You still have to have some pivots to go out there and offset that chalk. That's the main thing you should be thinking about out there with your lineup construction. And just to go ahead and confirm it, I meant to show this earlier. It is 2 sums off of hole number 1 again. So it is going to be all the slap dicks teeing off early. And just like round 3, it is Taylor Pendrith and Matthew Pavon that are going off of hole number 1. So something's never changed, right? Slap dicks are going to be slap dicks. And yeah, Pendrith and Pavon going off of hole number 1 first. I guess that doesn't change out there from day to day either. So where are we at? How do Thomas and Bhatia look? They are in many of your lineups and around you. You need an Aberg crumble, but he looks so solid. Let's take a look at the shots gained. I can tell you for a fact that Thomas looked really good. He gained like 4 strokes on approach today. So that box is checked right there. But let's look at Bhatia. So Bhatia didn't have the best day today, so he was a little bit scrappier. But days 1 and 2 were very favorable for Akshay. Gained 3 strokes on approach round 2. Round 1, gained about 2 strokes with his ball striking. So I would say that overall for the event, both players look really good. And the thing about JT, he might be like the guy that I really flag plant. And here's why. He gained putting in round 1. He also gained with the approach play. He had a pretty solid round. Round 2, he goes out there and gains a bunch of the putting. Not really what we know from JT, but he wasn't terrible on approach, right? He was still into the positive there. Round 3, he gains all that on approach, and then he starts to lose with the putter. I mean, the gains with the putter are really tempting on a JT, especially now that he showed us that his irons were dialed in out there for round number 3. So yeah, JT looks really good. Akshay days 1 and 2 is really checking the box, but we'll have to go out there and see. That's all I've got, guys. Best of luck out there with all of your exposure out there for tomorrow. Hopefully you guys can take down a GPP or 2. Also, smash a like button if you guys haven't already as well. And subscribe so you guys don't miss any of the content throughout the rest of the year. DGen75, of course, is going to have his Wednesday live stream this week. So make sure to keep an eye out for that over there on his Twitter/X when he's doing that, as well as for all the showdown content for rounds 2 through 4 last week. Hopefully it treats us nicely out here with this Sunday. But until next time, best of luck, and I'll see you guys out there for all that content.